Well, I'm going to continue my series asking you right up front, begging you to go and help to throw into my GoFundMe link, which is on my page here, because I'm taking the New South Wales government to court. 2 courts. I mean, it's 1 court, but 2 parts of the government, sorry. So the first government entity I'm taking to court is DCJ, the Department of Communities and Justice, for what they did when I was falsely diagnosed and incarcerated against my will for 4 weeks, which was harrowing and which I will describe in a little bit, at Concord Mental Health Unit for what was a good old-fashioned nervous breakdown, but which they falsely diagnosed as bipolar and psychotic. And in the comments section below, I will once again post the video called Ticking Painting, which occurred on the morning that they scheduled me, because later on that afternoon I was found vomiting into a waste paper basket, and after 3 hours of sitting still beside my son, spooked, with a heart rate of 166 beats per minute. I had 166 beats per minute for 3 hours straight. They could not hit me with enough Valium to bring it down. And I tried to tell them what had happened, which, you know, I'm a devout atheist, as I've told you before, and I don't believe in paranormal phenomenon or phenomena. And so this particular ticking painting video is not doctored, and you can clearly hear my son in the painting speaking, and when he speaks the ticking sound stops, and when he stops speaking the ticking sound starts again. And it's quite clear from where I'm holding my camera, which is right up close to a framed artwork of his that I had professionally framed and was hanging on the wall at our house in our rented by then property at Fegans Bay, because I had lost my owned property at 179 Fegans Bay Road to pay for an emergency hysterectomy 3 days after Royal North Shore stuck me on a 5-week-long public hospital wait list. So they did that on the 22nd of May 2017, and on the 25th of May 2017 I had an emergency life-saving hysterectomy. 6.4 hemoglobin was my reading, so they gave me a 3-unit pre-op blood transfusion. I'm going to need to wear glasses for some of these readings because because my eyes don't work for close-up, and you're going to laugh because I do this all the time. I fall asleep reading, and I have about 8 pairs of glasses that look like that as a consequence. And it's, you know, landfill from China. So, so when they scheduled me falsely, they put me into what they call E ward in Concord, which is an acute ward. And in there, I saw and heard things that no person should ever see or hear, only people who are deeply psychotic, which, of course, a lot of people are these days due to the use of ice. If anybody knows me, they know I don't do drugs. I don't do heroin. I don't do ice. I don't even smoke cigarettes these days. I used to smoke them with drink. I don't smoke pot. I'm pretty square, and I'm stone cold sober. So this is... there's quite a few things that I'll keep with the story, that part of the story. So when they threw me into the acute ward at Concord, I heard a woman who clearly sounded like she had been raped multiple times viciously, and she was screaming expletives, and she was just like a banshee. She was going off a tree, and she eventually was leapt onto by 4 or 5 burly male psych nurses, and they were all in special gear, and they strapped her and they shot her in the leg, I believe it was, with some huge sedative. And I don't know why it says friends here. I'm going to change this to public settings. Why does it say friends? I'm going to make that go public. Why can't I make this go public? It's too late. I've started it live. Tough. So this horrible experience, not only of being falsely accused of being psychotic, which I wasn't at all, because they hadn't looked at the ticking painting video that I'll put in these in the comments section below so that you can see it. And to this day, it remains a completely unexplained phenomenon. And it was also witnessed not only by my son and I, but by my then flatmate, who was a woman called Madison Van Heeren, Heeren. She was a registered nurse who had just come in at about 8:15 in the morning to our home because she'd done an overnight shift at Gosford Hospital, where she was, she was fresh out, and she was doing an overnight shift. And she came in and I said, Madison, have a look at this. And she came over and she looked at it and her jaw just dropped. And people I've played it to have had that same reaction the entire time. No one can explain what it is. It's not doctored, as I've said, and you can clearly hear my son speaking, and the ticking was emitting from his artwork framed on the wall. Now, this was extremely spooky to me, hence the elevated 166 beats per minute complete freak-out heart rate later on that day, because on my mother's deathbed, she died on the 14th of June 2016, we had been crying and holding hands in the weeks leading up to it and the months, and we both don't believe in anything on the other side, and I didn't. And I said, I don't know, Mum, if there's anything on the other side, show us a sign, would you? Would you give us a sign, like move a painting or something? And she's like, yeah, okay, Dee, and we're both crying, knowing that that's not true and not going to happen. Well, something happened. And not only did Concord Hospital go, yes, dear, the painting on the wall was ticking as they were wheeling me into the psych ward, but they had a good 4 or 5 hours from about 5 in the afternoon when they got me in there, because they kept trying to pull my son away from me in the library. The police were there were ambulance there. I heard a helicopter flying above at one point, and they kept trying to prise my son off me. And he didn't want to leave me, and I didn't want to leave him, and I kept holding on to him. But at 10 o'clock that night, they actually got a big burly security man to come in. My son had finally fallen asleep, and they prized me away from him and locked me, took all of my possessions from me. They took my bag, my phone, my purse, my entire possessions. They locked me in another ward, and they woke my son up, and DCJ caseworkers took him out to an unknown caseworker's place at Campbelltown, from which my sister Natasha Farrow-Pryke then went and picked him up in the middle of the night or early the next morning. And Natasha had my son for about a year, in which time he had a complete ball up at her place up at Palm Beach, which she couldn't afford. My father had conveniently just pissed off on her and left her with a $1,250 a week rent. They were sharing a rent together after my mother died, and my father left for a right-wing nut job called Wendy Starkey. And she's a right-wing nut job because she's a Trump voter and she's an LNP party funder, even though she encouraged my father to sue my single-parent sister, NIDA graduate Natasha Farrow-Pryke, whose son is very ill with late-stage 4 prostate cancer and potentially dying. Hello, Rod. I love you. You're a lovely man. And so this did not stop them from trying to sue her for back rent at Palm Beach. So when she could no longer afford Palm Beach because my father said, look, I'm the one on the lease, get out of there, you're not paying for it, it's my bill, piss off, she was sleeping in her car at one point. Nobody helped her there or then. And so she ended up out the back of buttfuck nowhere. And that's a technical term for a little town where she is, in a fibro shack that's disused because one of her school friends had it inherited but when her grandmother died. And so then my son was placed with my other sister, a woman called Elise Johnson, née Farrow-Pryke, my younger sister. She married into the Mitre 10 hardware fortune up on the northern beaches, and she's got 4 boys, and they're all at private schools. They like to believe that they're Christian. They bullshit themselves that they're Christian because they go to church on a Sunday, but they then tried to give my son away 1 year later to a foster carer. You thought your family stank. So Elise Johnson, despite her fake boobs and her gazebo pool and her double-storey $4 million house on the beach at Avalon and her 4 sons at private schools and her little morning gym routine where she's got to look like the great trophy wife, gave my son away, or at least tried to a woman you can Google on here. She's on Facebook, called Yale Michelle, Yaelle, Michelle. And she's at Mona Vale. And the way I found all of this out is that I went, fuck this shit, you are not taking my son. Because after 4 weeks of being incarcerated, otherwise known as scheduled against my will, they eventually released me, falsely diagnosed me as psychotic, put me on what I still have not lost the residue of, which is a hideous cocktail of drugs, notorious for putting on weight around the world on women's bodies, as if menopause wasn't enough, having just suffered an emergency hysterectomy the year before, compelling the sale of my home. No joke, from a prolapsed submucosal fibroid. That was this fibroid that had grown down into my cervix, prizing me open 24/7 for 6 months, and I nearly died on the operating table 3 days after Royal North Shore put me on a 5-week-long hospital wait list for emergency hysterectomy surgery. They put me on that on the 22nd of May 2017, and I nearly died 3 days later in Randwick Private Hospital on the 25th of May 2017. And that relieved me of $17,500 for private surgery that I didn't have. The surgery component was only $7,000. The hospital stay was $9,000 for a private hospital. And so I had to sell my house at 179 Fegans Bay Road. And so if anyone's out there doing the timeline, because get this, your taxpayer money, New South Wales taxpayers, has been paid by this state government because I've told them that I'm lodging a claim against them unless they settle with me first, which I'm strenuously encouraging them to do because I'm now, of course, completely complex PTSD, majorly clinically depressed, having not seen my children for 5 years and on a pension, from which child support is garnished by the man who not only abused me and traumatised me in the first place, alongside the raft of things that I'll tell you also happened, as my mother died and her stepbrother, my godfather, like an uncle to me, murdered his wife with a pillow over her head 12 weeks later on the 13th of September 2016 out at Milperra. That's Warren Rogers, if you want to look him up on YouTube, and Anne Rogers, I'll post that down below. He murdered her with a pillow over her head on the conjugal bed. This is a man who is effectively my uncle 12 weeks after my mother dies, whilst I'm hemorrhaging nearly to death from a prolapsed submucosal fibroid. And so at that moment, November 2016, lo and fucking behold, our family Federal Circuit Parenting Law Court case comes up after I'd initiated it on the 14th of March 2014. It took till November 2016 to get a hearing because they force you through mediation first. Guess what? We then got the wrong freaking judge, and her name... Federal Magistrate Leanne Turner, who took the advice, despite the fact that both she and Lucia Vardenega, a Regulation 7 Family Report Court writer, who I'd requested because of Ian Little's domestic violence, not only to me with a brick through my back window and a threat that he could kill me and get away with it because everybody would believe it was in self-defence, quote unquote, and kicking his ex-wife Lindy Green up the arse and chipping her coccyx bone in front of their children on Christmas morning the year 2000, and dragging his ex, Dust Diseases New South Wales manager or head, one of the directors of the Dust Diseases Board, Michelle Daly, that's Michelle with one L, D-A-L-E-Y, dragging her off a bed when she was passed out drunk and her head smashed down on the floor. She was internally bleeding from her ear the next morning, rocked up to the hospital, reported that. The registered nurse said, well, how the hell did this happen? And so, of course, she said, I'm going to have to mandatorily report this. So this man has, at this stage, got two prior to me, prior to the police taking out a final apprehended domestic violence order protecting me in February 2013 after Ian put a brick through my back window because he thought that was a reasonable way of collecting his computer after he was so revoltingly drunk that I asked him to leave and come back and get it in the morning. So most people, so in the November 2016 court case, we had this fantastic man prior to that moment in time called Federal Magistrate Kemp, Dale Kemp, D-A-L-E, Kemp, K-E-M-P. And that didn't work at all. And Federal Magistrate Dale Kemp was a lovely man, and he'd looked down the barrel of his lenses at one point because he'd cited the automatically subpoenaed police record of both Ian and I and seen that mine was totally clean, but Ian had assaulted 3 female partners. And he looked at him, and the federal parenting court in Australia forces you through mandatory mediation. And if you can't make a parenting agreement between yourselves voluntarily by consent, that is, consent orders, then the judge will make one for you. And he looked at Ian and he said, I will be awarding sole parental responsibility, SPR, in this case, because I've seen the record. And if you can't both work it out between you, one adult will be getting the child. And when they say getting the child, it doesn't mean that the other parent can't visit the child and have a meaningful relationship, as defined by Section 60cc of the Family Law Court Act Australia 1975, and also as defined by Article 9 of the United Nations Rights of the Child, to a meaningful relationship with both of her parents, provided that both of her parents are of no harm to her physically, emotionally or otherwise. And of course here I am at this point winning plaudits as a family childcare, federal government regulated daycare childcare service provider in my home at Clovelly, 50 hours a week alone for 4 years, from 2011 to 2015, leaving him when I was pregnant because he'd done such things as slam a door in my nose and bruised it when I found out his dick was inside of somebody else and had been for about 30 years, including while our child was in utero, and so therefore could have infected not only me but the child, and had cut the power to our house, for example, that we were renting in Clovelly, when he didn't get his own way with what he wanted to watch on the TV one night. So he went outside and cut the power to the whole house, even though it was my TV, and I only asked to watch one program because my friend was on it, or an acquaintance was on it. Fiona Patton, the Reason Party senator, the previous senator from Victorian for the Reason Party, was on Q&A, and I wanted to watch it. This is back in 2010, and I had just met her recently at a shindig. And I desperately wanted to hear what she said and see the interview, and we usually watch a different program. So he went out and cut the power to the house. And then another time, I dropped my baby's lovely $20 porous bib, that one with a big scooper on it that catches all the food in the sink, and he'd just gone and pulled a pan of whatever cooking he was doing and cooking oil on and just poured the cooking oil straight into the sink, completely ruining this extremely expensive child's bib for my son. And I had the temerity to pull it up and go, what'd you do that for? That's completely wrecked. They're really expensive. Couldn't you just lift it up and put it on the sideboard first, Ian? And at that point, that was enough to trigger this fucking violent narcissist into an apoplectic rage, because his will had been, questioned. And he dragged me around. He ended up dragging me. I think he threw something first. He threw something of mine first and broke it, as I recall. So this is 2010, it's getting a bit hazy. So he threw something and broke it. So when he did that, I got his coffee machine and threw it down and broke it in retaliation. And at that point, he grabbed my hair and dragged me around the floor. And my daughter Alice was screaming at this point, all of which was blamed on me in the Family Law Court Act and by DCJ New South Wales caseworker Jacqueline Kelman, along with Nikki Strong, Nikki Strong, and I've got a list of them here. I'm going to start, I'm rattling them off. The current one's Alexandra Schill-Habel at Wollongong. Her supervisor is Catherine Levita Cito. Before her, there was Mazda Hamden. Mesa, M-A-Y-S-A, Hamden, out at Hurstville, and her supervisor was Yvonne Raffarazzi. And before her, there'd been Diane Mitchell and Bryce Pepper and Nikki Strong and Jacqueline Kelman. And then there was Diane Mitchell down in Wollongong. In fact, I believe there was a dozen caseworkers for my son in 5 years. And here's the thing. After they prized him from me that night, when I'd had a perfectly reasonable trauma-induced nervous breakdown, are you okay day, Hello, mental health advocates out there, because if you can't have a nervous breakdown after you lose your mother and then her stepbrother murders his wife whilst you bleed to death, and then you get the wrong fucking judge in the Federal Circuit Parenting Court of Australia called Federal Magistrate Leanne Turner, who negligently Mark Dreyfus, and on advice of the outrageously negligent, she should be fired as well, Lucia Vardenega, overlooked the subpoenaed New South Wales police record of this domestic violence perpetrator who'd assaulted 3 female partners in the last 14 years at that stage, and when he owned no property, and when he wasn't a professional childcare worker, and then gave my 5-year-old daughter, in a ruling that didn't come out until the 28th of February 2017, 3 or 4 months after the November 2016 trial dates, ordering by order that the police could be called if I tried to interfere with the father collecting her from Woy Woy Public School, where she had just started 4 weeks prior with her brother Augie, whose father had died when he was 5, just after he met him because his father headbutted me on a street in Ettalong 4 days before my son's first birthday, drunk as a skunk, when I'd asked him to leave the house I owned under mortgage at the Central Coast at Umina at that stage. I've bought 3 in my lifetime without a cent of help from anyone, except the Australian Taxpayers First Homeowners Grant, by the way. Not a buck from anyone. Not a man, not my family, nobody. Single mother of 3 children. And I'd come home and he was on drugs, clearly in his eyes, and so I texted him and said, pack your stuff and get out, be gone by tomorrow. And so he was, and a couple of days later we tried to go down the road in public and talk about how he was going to see his child given the situation, and he screamed drunkenly at me so revoltingly that I walked away with my son in the pram. And he phoned me 3 times and I ignored it, packed my son in the car, packed my pram up, shut the boot to my Mazda 3, turned around, and he ambushed me from behind at that point, screamed in my face and headbutted me. Well, he didn't take a walk at court because the police said that I could have done that to myself. Hello, Australian domestic violence advocates out there, Attorneys General of all states and territories, Federal Attorney General, Katie Gallagher, Minister for Women, all ministers for domestic violence and people around the country. You know, he walked free because there were no witnesses. And I could have gone home and smashed my own bruise onto my nose. In fact, they even allege that the photo that I went down to the police station and got taken immediately I'd been assaulted, that was potentially makeup. Even though you'd think that the police could have got me to, show them whether it was makeup by rubbing my nose, and no, that bruise is not makeup. So he walked free, but because he'd threatened to kill me 3 times on the phone, which had gone through to the voicemail keeper first, the police heard that because I played it in court, and they chased me up the road as I walked out in disgust halfway through the ruling, hearing exactly where the ruling was going when the judge at the time was a he in the Woy Woy court in 2010, and he started his ruling by saying, the law is not a beauty contest. And I thought, what does that mean? And then I realised, oh, hang on. He's saying that just because you look good, just because you're standing here in a nice suit and your story adds up and you're plausible and you're a mum and you own a home and you're not on drugs and everything you're saying makes sense, and we can hear that he's yelled at you and threatened to kill you, just because we can see that your story looks good, we don't have enough evidence that he actually did then assault you. So he's walking free. Nonetheless, they put a 3-year-long AVO on him, the police did, because of what he'd threatened on the phone. So it wasn't until my son was 5 that I finally chose to reintroduce him to his real father, and it took him a very long while for my son to drop his guard and to stop feeling awkward and try to figure out why on earth this man had suddenly just appeared in his life, and this is his real dad, and why wasn't he there all the time? And 5 weeks later, Michael Patrick Ives repaid that kindness by dropping dead of a heroin overdose. And that was the second worst day of my life, the first worst day being the day my mother died, because I had to quickly sit there on the 28th-ish of April 2014 and work out exactly when and how I was going to tell my son, who was about to arrive home from kindergarten at Clovelly Public, where he was being bullied in his very first year, and when the teacher didn't believe that he was either. And I had to tell him that his recently met and recently reloved father was dead. I mean, you would think that any mental health professional like Dr. Lucia Vardanega, or some fucking genius like Federal Magistrate Leanne Turner, I'm getting you, Leanne Turner, I'm coming for you seriously in the courts. Don't pretend it's a violence order. I'm coming for you because there was a precedent set in the Family Law Court, Federal Circuit and Family Law Court, that's what they call it in Australia, last year in 2023, by Federal Magistrate Wegeney, W-E-G-E-N-E-Y, the same man who ruled for Geoffrey Rush in the case against Rupert Murdoch and the defamation of the trash tabloid shit rags that Murdoch publishes, and tried to trash Geoffrey Rush's reputation, and he won that $2 million lawsuit. And that judge, Wegeney, ruled that another judge, Salvatore, could be sued by a father successfully, and the father did successfully sue for $360,000 for bias. And in this case, I'll be suing Federal Magistrate Leanne Turner for her fucking outright neglect of reading a New South Wales police report with Ian Little, date of birth 22nd of September 1960, assaulting 3 women and having 3 AVOs, and 3 women go to the police and make reports, one of them mandatorily a nurse. All of these things will be in the comments section below, all of these proofs. So I've got 2 cases going against New South Wales State. One's been started, and that's against Concord Hospital. Now, they've put your taxpayer money into a company called Mackinson-Bees, or Dapachet, I think is how they pronounce it. Mackinson-Dapachet, MacDap, darling. MacDap is going to receive shitloads of your bucks instead of paying me for the trauma that Concord has put me through, because no less than 3 other psychiatrists after Concord, plus 1 psychologist, have all said, well, this woman is not psychotic, she's not bipolar, she's not narcissistic personality disorder, she's fucking major clinically depressed with complex PTSD, because she has had trauma after trauma from men assaulting her, a murder, losing her womb, losing her house to pay to save her life while she lost her womb and nearly lost her life, and then losing her 5-year-old daughter to the man who abused her. And then to top it all off, after Elise Johnson, my sister, got given my son as the second placement by DCJ, my son was telling them for 3 years straight to a man called Dennis Chapman at Gosford that he wished to be restored, is the term. He didn't use that word. He said given back to his loving and educational mother. And I put that in quotation marks, because that's what a judge called me. Magistrate Stubbs, S-T-U-B-B for bottom, S, Magistrate Stubbs called me a loving and educational mother on the 22nd of February 2021 in Woy Woy Children's Court. That's what she called me. And my son said, my mother loves me and I want to be restored to her. My sister was crying in the dock saying, well, she's a loving mother, you know. She's a bit OCD, you know. She makes them wash their hands all the time and they're always neatly dressed and they've always got to have shoes on. But she's a loving mum. She's never done anything wrong. And my dad's sitting there crying and everyone's going, what the hell? And I've got handing up references and affidavits for my childcare work and my mothering abilities, and all the people who've known me for 25 years in my adult life saying, oh, Danielle's a kind and caring parent and friend, and here's the evidence. And I'm, you know, there's esteemed film producers, and that's not name dropping, they're just people I knew because I was involved in the arts, and my partner at the time, who's like, I've known Danielle since she was 17 and I've met both of her children and they're lovely children, and then my neighbour up the road, who was head of mental health administration, not a psychologist or psychiatrist, but admin at Royal North Shore, as it turned out. He was my good neighbour and he had seen me with my children played with his children, and he's like, I've never seen her put a foot wrong, they're fastidiously turned out, they've got beautiful healthy food, you know. There was just overwhelming evidence that I was having a fucking nervous breakdown and that there was nothing else wrong. So instead of DCJ settling with me, or at least even attempting to settle this court case with me, they're going to take your taxpayer money and they are going to literally fight me through a woman called Liz Flannery, who's a senior counsel, and she's won in the High Court. So they're clearly taking my case fairly seriously. Except at this point, I've sent her a cross-examination that I conducted on the 14th of March 2017, so do the timeline. I've just lost Madeline to Ian, my 5-year-old daughter, to a man who's shacked up with a woman I've never met and my daughter's never met, like shacked up 5 minutes before, relocated to Engadine, 2 hours south of where I owned a home at Fegans Bay above Woy Woy in the forest overlooking the water, taken my son away from my father, my boy who's lost his father, and his eldest daughter, Alice, serially litigated regarding by Tim Friedman, who's a sperm donor to her, and 3 other siblings that he's got. So he's got 4 children to 3 separate women, 2 to Lauren Jackson, 1 to Louise Braithwaite in Melbourne, who's a lawyer, and 1 to me. These men. Look what they do to the world. Look what they do to women. The murders, the rapes, the butcherings, the wars. Fuck. Fuck off, man. Fuck off patriarchy. We hate you. You know? Any self-respecting woman who takes one look at this planet and sees what men do to women and the unpaid labour of us rearing your future taxpayers and underpinning your GDP, and then for the height of it, you not only take that, suck it off us like blood-sucking parasites, but to make your budgets, but then you send us, for the grand pleasure of rejoining the full-time paid workforce, you send us a great big new tax called $200 per child per day daycare fees? For us to have the equivalency, the gender equivalency with you to participate in the paid workforce. So 2 kids like I had under 5 was $400 a week today. Back then it was $280 a week. Now it's $400 in Sydney and Melbourne. The national average is $137.45. National average. But in Sydney and Melbourne, $200 per child per day for long daycare. So you got 2 kids, you leave a violent man. Oh, well, that's $400 a day, 5 days a week, $2,000 a week. Childcare fees, 50 weeks a year, there's $100,000. Well, if you can't pull that out of your... If you're single, if you don't have an established career, or if you're not from money, or mummy or daddy of you are not stepping in, grandparents aren't stepping in to look after the kids, or an admixture of all of that, which is the usual template for working parents across the place, because childcare is so expensive. They do one day with one set of grandparents, another day with another, then they've got 3 days to find in paid childcare. So if you can't afford, as a single mother of 2 children under 5, to leave a violent man, because it's $100,000 a year for you to rejoin the paid workforce in Sydney or Melbourne, and then if you can even get a house to sit and rot on the $550 a week sole parents pension, you then get to lose superannuation and your HECS debt, your university degree HECS debt, your higher education contribution scheme for overseas journalists, HECS, university tertiary education debt owed to the tax department, is indexed to the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which usually sits in Australia anywhere between 2 and 4%. So your uni degree debt goes up while you can't afford $200 a day childcare that parents with penises don't have to pay. And you don't get super? And then you wonder why a massive cohort of women in their 50s thrown on the scrap heap because their CVs look like shit after they've struggled along bringing up children by themselves for years and they can't get back into the game and the paid workforce because they've taken time out. And this is fucking fair, is it? This is equality? In the 21st century in a democracy, this is equality, ladies and gentlemen. No, it's not. Jim Chalmers, Katie Gallagher. No, it's not. No, it's not. Labor, Albo, no, it's not. Okay? Mark Dreyfus, no, it's not. Michaelia Cash, you're the alternative AG, Attorney General, right? No, it's not. It's not equality, is it? Just like your whole party. And its countenance doesn't reflect any equality of gender at all either. It's not equality. It's not welfare to pay for childcare, universally free. I had so many women come into Clovelly Family Daycare when I was forced to run it because I couldn't afford to put my children in my own childcare, while simultaneously, in someone else's childcare, so I opened my own, while simultaneously being told by the Federal Circuit Parenting Court of Australia that men have got so many rights now, even if they've abused you, that you can't move more than about 20 minutes drive away in case you inconvenience them a bit too much for the swapping and the sharing of the child. That was brought in when Pauline Hanson put the heat, because she had the balance of power for a while back in Australia, way back when, in 2007 to be precise. She put the heat on then Prime Minister John Howard, maker of the 10-point plan, the only actually, by definition, piece of racist legislation in the democratic universe at that point in time, because he made a piece of legislation to deliberately remove rights won in the court system of Australia of people, called native title, based on their race. As a 10-point plan. It's a racist piece in our lifetimes. You know, hello, Laura Tingle. Fuck you, Justin Stevens, at the news director at the ABC. Who do you think you are? Weren't all the massacres enough? We massacred the children based on their race, drove them off cliffs, shot them because you were taking their land from them very quickly across Tasmania in the frontier wars and the black wars of Tasmania, very quickly across the rest of the land as you stole them into slavery. If they were girls, you put them in homes and taught them to be nothing but domestic servants. And then if they even were paid a paltry wage, then the very boards, the Aboriginal boards that were meant to guard and keep their wages for them like they couldn't do it themselves, then stole that money. And then when there was stockmen up in the territory and all around Western Australia and Queensland who were working for nothing but damper and tea until the Wave Hill walk-off. And then when in the 60s, in our lifetime, black people in Australia, Aboriginals, were not allowed to go into public swimming pools and pubs and sit in certain buses and bars and places because they were black. And you, Justin Stevens and Peter Dutton and the LNP and all your shit fuckery, you want to try and lie to us that this is not a specifically racist country. And that a journalist of fine integrity like Laura Tingle, while we're just taking a nice excursion straight off the side here, with the scenic route, it's a discursive route, that the white Australia policy? That my mother's adoptive family, because mum's mum died when she was 10, so Auntie Francie brought her up, and Auntie Francie was the mother, the late mother of the murderer. So my mother's stepbrother's mother, right? So she's my mother's de facto mother because my mum's mum died in Marrickville when she was 10, when my mum was 10. So she got reared for quite a while until her father remarried by Auntie Francie, and she had two little boys, Warren and Wayne Rogers, and Warren Rogers murdered Anne on the 16th. So these good, hardy, nice, give you the shirt off their backs, Labor voting, Bankstown, working class, Paul Keating-esque Labor voters, dyed in the wool, were all for the white Australia policy because the new Australians, the chinks and the wogs and the wops, like the boomers, should have assimilated. Learn to speak English. What are you doing? Can't you speak English? Why aren't you speaking our language? Our culturally imperialist language, founded on the lie of an empty country, terra nullius, empty land, because it was only legal for you to take land in 1788 under British law by three means. One, you had to vanquish the natives in a war. Two, you could have made a treaty with them in compensation for their land. Or three, if it was empty, you just took it. So they fucking lied under their own system, notwithstanding no acknowledgement or care or respect for the 65,000 plus years of already extant Aboriginal law that was here. But they lied under their own law. Terra nullius, so the whole nation's founded on a racist lie. And then we have the white Australia policy. You can't come here, even though we came here on boats, every single fucking one of us, until planes were invented. And you can't come here unless you're white. Oh, hang on, we've got a bit of a shortage of people. It's post-World War. Oh, we'll get some immigrants in. We'll stick them on the Snowy Mountain scheme. They'll pay them fuck all as well. wops, wogs, chinks. There's nothing more racist than a 21st century politician. He was 20th century back then when he wrote the 10-point plan, John Howard. And by the way, he was one of the only idiots in the Western world who was letting the Springboks, South African rugby team, come here to play when the whole rest of the world were going, nah, we're not having any truck with you because you're doing apartheid to the blacks over in South Africa, so we're not playing ball with you, buddy. But John Howard's going, I think that's a great idea. We'll let them in. And I'm 10 years old, 9 actually, in 1980, going to Dad, what's this Springboks tour about? Why is this such a big deal? First essay, racist nation. Justin Stevens, you miserable shit. You turd. You're racist because you're denying that there's racism. And then you have the hide to say, I've spoken to Laura Tingle. It's inappropriate that she says these personal opinions in a public domain. Get fucked. They're not personal opinions. They're statements of fact, buddy-o. Ida Bartros, fire him. He's out. And Janet Albrechtsen, eat a dick. You fuckwad. Were you constantly bullshitting on about what was it that I only ever read you. It's not when I go to wipe my ass with Rupert Murdoch's magazines, as Tony Windsor, the great independent MP, once said about 15 years ago. He was good. It's not, I kind of accidentally come across you like in cafes when you're visage out at me from the front page and I go, what's this idiot saying now? Oh, right. The Attorney General of Australia is only getting the job because she's a woman, and I wouldn't want to be Attorney General if I was only getting it because I was a woman. I'm like, who said she was only getting it because she was a woman? Because you're so fucking sexist, Janet Albrechtsen, that you think she's only getting it because she's a woman. Whereas, like, all the rest of the men who've been ruling the known universe in religions, in corporations, in all governmental bodies, in Australia, in democracies. They all got there on merit, of course. It wasn't because they had a cock. Look at the London Philharmonic, by the way. Get some footage out on YouTube. There's not one woman in it until about 1970. What, they couldn't play instruments? Fucking asshole, Albrechtsen, Murdoch, Dutton, or Rupert Murdoch. You don't. Justin Stevens, go and work for Sky News. Fuck off and go and work for Rupert Murdoch. You're disgraceful. As if. And then we couldn't even give them a voice in 2023. Them, we, the colonialist thieves, couldn't give them the decency of having a voice to Parliament enshrined in the Constitution so that it didn't matter whether Tweedledee or Tweedledum was down in Canberra twiddling the knobs, that they were going to have a right made comprised of like 300 different groups to talk about what specifically, site-specific, culturally specific, geo-specific answers Aboriginal people wanted to have to the problems that white people had given them from thieving their land, stealing their children off them because their skin was a colour that wasn't black and it wasn't white, it was somewhere in between. And if that's not racist, and today, to this day, New York Times and London Times, Australia is number 1 in the Northern Territory and number 2 per capita on the planet for the theft of children by welfare departments. In New South Wales, it's called DCJ, the Department of Communities and Justice. We are number 1 and number 2, respectively, per capita on the planet for the theft of children from their mothers and fathers, and those are usually Aboriginal women who've had the shit beaten out of them and who are poor and traumatised, because they were often stolen, or children of people who were stolen from their entire family, beaten over the hands and other parts of their bodies if they spoke their mother tongue in the institutions that they were then taken as orphans and put in when they weren't orphans at all. And Justin Stevens, you call this, you have the hide to say that Laura Tingle was out of line for saying, well, of course, Australia's a racist nation. It's obvious. Oh, we couldn't even give them an enshrined voice to Parliament in the 2023 referendum on October the 14th. 2023. 7 days after the world looked at Israel and Hamas. So here is a great big fat wad of material that I'm going to be working my way through. I've picked up these. I've been travelling around a bit. I left these off around November, December, just disgusted with, by the way, in that whole time, getting back to the other story. So my sister gives away my son. And so DCJ, in their infinite wisdom, after 12 different caseworkers and 3 years of him telling them that he wants to be given back to his mother, still don't give him back to his mother based on a 2-hour interview in Woy Woy Library conducted by a parasite called Gillian Murray, who does nothing but care and protection work, and spent 2 hours playing Battleships Galactica with my son and I in Woy Woy Library, and concluded that I was unfit to have him for the rest of time until he was 18. Despite the fact that I was so deeply depressed and traumatised from losing my house and losing my womb and my mum and my 5-year-old and my son, and shaking, thinking I was developing Parkinson's. So I was running around to all these different neurologists, Dr. Anna Schutz, neurologist up at Erina, Dr. Scott, Associate Professor Scott White, W-H-Y-T-E, Scott White, a neurologist with Newcastle University who also practices at Gosford Hospital, Professor Simon Lewis, the world's leading Parkinson's specialist. He's parked at the Woolcock Institute down at Glebe, at the end of Glebe Point Road. To get to him, I had to go through psychologist Dr. Diane, 2 N's and an E, Richards. She said this woman is extremely anxious. Oh, and I told you before, Harvard University have found out that if you've got anxiety, then you necessarily have either or both of insomnia and depression. It's a triangle, literally. Harvard University Medical School have decreed that you always have 2 of the 3, if not the whole 3. So by this stage, all of that, I'm shaking and everything. And then I finally see Ticking Painting on the 10th of September, 2018. And I've said to my mother on the deathbed, Mum, if there's something on the other side, can you show me a sign? Can you move a painting? And then this phenomenon happens. And I just absolutely lose it. Like, I'm spooked so badly that they found me vomiting in a library with my son beside me later that day, with a heart rate of 166 beats per minute, and I'm going, the painting ticking, and they're going, yes, the painting was ticking, yes, of course it was, of course it was, as they're wheeling me into the nut house. Cop that. So my sister then tries to give, my rich sister with a fake tits and a $4 million house at Avalon, goes to church on a Sunday thinking she's a Christian, and whose son, Alec, was only 3 months younger than my son, so they had grown up together. Natasha had been in Japan singing and doing her NIDA thing, or drawing, and she was nowhere near us. And I was bringing my children up with my mother and my father, driving to see them, because Mum had Parkinson's and Dad was still working. Elise had 4 kids and a shop. So I was driving to the Northern Beaches to see them. So then Elise takes my son. She has him for a year. In 2020, I get stuck in COVID lockdown, number 1, border closure in Tasmania, to top it all off for 3 months. And in this time, I'm running 2 court cases up to the New South Wales District Court. No lawyer, no money, self-defended. And I'm banging on doors going, I want my child back. My child wants me back. What are you doing? What are you doing? And case number 2021/81195, followed by case number 2023 123/123/745, it might be. I'll have to look that second one up. Both of those district court cases. The second one was lost, and I'm not joking, because by this time my son had totally given up, totally formed new friends down at his selective high school, down in Wollongong, where his father had illegally relocated him with my daughter, who was not meant to go any further south than Engadine by order of Federal Magistrate Kemp, who I finally got put back on the court case after Leanne Turner ruled my daughter away from me. But by that time, the hearing came up with Kemp back on it, because I'd bashed on Legal Aid's door so hard and so exhausted and said, look what's going on. They sent Kemp back onto it. But by then I'd had a nervous breakdown, and so we went to a trial on the phone, and they didn't know that I was incarcerated, and I'm going, oh my God, like, I've had a nervous breakdown, like, what do I do here? I can't even get a lawyer, I can't get legal advice, I can't get on the phone to legal aid. They don't give you a phone in the nut house. You don't even get a fucking phone call. They take your phone from you. Procedural error after egregious violation, after negligence, after unfairness, if ever there was a case. And I get on the phone and I make consent orders with the family law court and this piece of shit Ian Little, who's assaulted 3 women and done everything I told you, and been absolutely what his wife Linda Green called constantly verbally and emotionally abusive, to the point where her and her rich Jewish family's money got the fuck out of there and divorced him after 2 years. After he belted his stepson, her son to a prior partner, over the nose so hard on a trampoline in the backyard one day with lots of witnesses around that his stepson's nose bled. And so Federal Magistrate Scarlett ordered Ian Little into anger management and allowed Lindy Green to relocate, but not before Ian spent 1 year dragging her back to Sydney from Yamba and made her stay here for a year until the court case was heard, and she finally won the right to move 900 kilometres away from Sydney with her daughter. And Ian was working 2 jobs at that point in time because he fancied that he might like to get a pizza restaurant up in Clovelly, so he didn't even see his child anyway. Not at all. He was turning up for a once every fortnight for like 4 hours, but he still wanted Lindy to stay in Sydney for him. Lindy had repartnered with an old flame and they were all based around Yamba. So, of course, none of the federal judges seemed to talk to any of the other federal judges or get any of the other federal court cases out that pertain to the same parents when they're about a different child to a different parent, and go, oh, Jesus, this guy's been ordered into anger management by Federal Magistrate Scarlett and he had to do a 6-week course and he was ordered not to consume alcohol for the 24 hours prior to collecting his children. Shit, maybe we should have a good look at this one with Farrow-Pryke. No, that didn't happen. So I'm in the nut house at this stage and we finally get the retrial. And I've had a nervous breakdown, and so I just take anything I can get and I go, okay, I'll have her every second weekend and half school holidays. Well, 6 weeks later, DCJ, in their infinite shit fuckery, fuck you, Jacqueline Kelman and Nikki Strong, fuck you. You phoned up Tim Friedman and Ian Little and told them that you'd taken my son, and so they were like, oh, this is just great, all bets are off. Tim Friedman had been litigating against me since my daughter was 3. Sperm donor dude, whose mummy and daddy bought him a house in Newtown when he won a scholarship to Sydney Uni, just bought him a house so he could sit around and do what he liked because he didn't have to pay the rent. And then he's knocked up a woman down the road called Louise Braithwaite in 2008 while he's taking me to court when my daughter's 3 because she's born in 2005, she's now 19, and saying that I couldn't move more than 20 minutes away from him up to Umina where I could afford to buy a house, even though his mummy and daddy had bought him a house, even though he's a sperm donor. And so I go, okay, well, I'll share it with you. All right, well, I'll move back to Sydney when she starts school so we can share. Well, I didn't have a job then and I couldn't get a house therefore. And so I just went, oh, I've made this agreement that I have to move back to Sydney. Oh, I'll have to hand her over then. And Fuckwit Features here has no idea at this stage, Mark Dreyfus, that there is no penalty for parents who do not comply with parenting orders. I'll say that again. There are no penalties in Australia whatsoever for parents who steal children against federal circuit parenting court orders. None. But we have 10-year-old Aboriginal children in jail for stealing multiple packets of chips in the Northern Territory and Western Australia. We've got the youngest people on the planet in jail, younger than Saudi Arabia. If you're from Sydney, do yourself a favour, head up Parramatta Road, go out west, and before you leave the inner west, take a left onto Crystal Street, bung it up, and then look straight out the window because some genius has put a beautiful big painting on the outside of a heritage wall of an old building, and they've listed from top to bottom a list of countries and what the minimum age is for people to go to jail in that time. And Australia is down the bottom, age 10. So not only do we send Aboriginal kids to jail, adult jails, aged 10 for stealing and robbing a car, broken Aboriginal kids. If you don't pay your parking fine in New South Wales, after 4 months, they'll add $50 to it, and if you don't pay it within another 4 weeks, they'll cancel it. Your licence, that is. Your driver's licence, they won't cancel the ticket. The non-payment of the state government revenue parking fine ticket will result in the cancellation of your driver's licence. And at that point in time, if you get in your car and drive, despite the fact that your skill set has not changed one iota, you'll be in a criminal court. A criminal court. And the record will stay on your name for 10 years, preventing shitloads of work opportunities, because a digital criminal national police check is 24 hours long in the age of digital these days. And or you'll get a community services order put on you where you've got to go out and do some good things for the community to pay your debt off, or a hefty $2,000 fine plus will be put on you. Or you might go to jail if you've driven your car unlicensed and unregistered, and you will be a criminal. But if you steal a child off their father or their mother against federal parenting court orders, no punitive regime as our Labor, and I say that having voted for them all of my life, our Labor government chose in the 2023 review of the Family Law Court Act 1975, which I helped alongside other people to cause, after years of going, come on, this is outrageous, look what's going on over here. That's a moral hazard, that's a huge loophole, you've got to shut that one. What, you can steal a packet of chips and go to jail, but you steal a child and fuck all happens? I mean, are you joking? And they wrote back, we are so sorry to hear of your travails. However, we've decided not to implement a punitive regime on advice of the Australian Institute of Family Studies. Well, A, who the fuck are they, and B, what would they know? Because the incentive, again, I've said this a million times and I'm going for it again, the incentive in Australia is don't share your children. Like if you're an asshole, don't share your children, because then you'll have to pay child support, or you might not get as much child support. And that's depending on how much each respective parent earns versus how many nights per year the child stays with each parent. It's a formula. And the Child Support Agency in Australia is subject to 7 different pieces of legislation, by the way. The agency makes that formula up and pa-ching, sends out a little piece of paper and tells you what you owe. Well, this fucker Ian Little, he got given my son after my sister tried to give my son away to a foster carer called Yael Michelle. At which point DCJ steps in and goes, oh no, I think we better keep the child, instead of putting him to a stranger. We won't give him to the mother. No, can't give him to the mother, even though she owns property and she's never assaulted anybody. She's just having a nervous breakdown and her son wants her back and she wants her back. And to top it off, under the previous LNP, Liberal National Party, they are not Liberal at all, they're Conservatives in Australia. The LNP state government at the time was run at the DCJ, the Department of Communities and Justice, by a minister called Natasha McLaren-Jones, hyphenated surname, as you'd expect it to be spelt, and her 2IC was a man called Michael Coates-Trotter. Now, Michael Coates-Trotter is a lovely man, very interesting and lovely man. He has to be. I've seen him on national TV. Something awful happened to his daughter recently. She was brave enough to speak out and do something about it. He happens to be married to one of our best MPs ever that Australia's ever had, Tanya Plibersek. She's our current federal environment minister. She took him on after he'd done 4 or 5 years in an Australian jail for the importation of heroin. So from 17 to 21, he was in jail as a heroin smuggler. He got out of jail, did his time, cleared his name, and worked his way so far up the bureaucratic New South Wales chain that he won the 2IC position of the head of the Justice Department. And it made international headlines, in Britain at least. Heroin dealer is head of Justice Department in New South Wales. They're all thinking, the fucking, what do they call us, the penal colonies? Oh, the convicts. Yeah, convicts for stealing a loaf of bread because you're so poor you want to feed your family. Toffee-nosed British assholes. Currency less. We don't like ya. So, not all of you, just gross generalisation. The point being that he was allowed to not only recover by doing his time in a jail and then go on to be the head of DCJ, but he was the person who, at the time that I was incarcerated against my will on a false diagnosis after all this male-caused trauma and my reproductive system hemorrhaging and my mother dying, and the state of New South Wales letting me down by putting me on a wait list that would have killed me and compelling me to sell my house. He's standing there on YouTube and on TV and in press releases going, DCJ New South Wales is going to do everything in its power to give children back to their loving parents where practicable. No, they didn't. They took my son away based on a 2-hour interview and a report written by a parasite called Gillian with a J, Murray, Murray, from Erina. So that's the intro, and I'm going to be reading from this opus because when you uplift and copy things at the district court and in any other court in Australia, you see what they've got on you. And what they've got on me, this is Crown material, District Court Conviction Appeal, estimated HG time 3 hours. Oh, hang on, wrong one. Well, they didn't give me 3 hours. That was the one that was overturned on appeal. That wad of material is what they asked one judge to read. And this was the apprehended violence order that the police then put on me when, after having my children kept from me for 2 years because DCJ allowed Ian Little, a known domestic violence perpetrator with 3 different partners who owns no property and is not a childcare professional, unlike me, who hasn't assaulted anyone, who's bought 3 houses and is a childcare professional, to take my son and my daughter and take them to 2 different houses without telling me the fucking address. Of where my children's heads lay at night. This is what they pulled together from DCJ. So on page 98, Constable Phibbs goes and speaks to Ian Little. This is held on the 23rd of August in 2023, last year, and I overturned it on the 22nd of January this year, 2024. Self-represented on appeal in the Downing Centre. And so that date again, I know that's August 2023, but the first hearing in which he'd agreed to remove Madeline and Augie's names from the AVO first was heard on in January, on the 24th of January 2023. But yet he went down the road, Ian Little went down the road 4 days later and in person spoke to the head of Taronji Public School, the principal, the female principal, whose name eludes me, and enrolled my daughter and said, oh, and by the way, you can't let the mother pick the daughter up ever because here's an AVO with the daughter's name on it. The mother's not allowed to come near her. And so the school calls the police, throws me, when I tried to turn up and feed my children home-cooked meals and food, throws me in a shit-smeared paddy wagon at 7:30 the next morning, 5 police. They can't fucking save Rowan Baxter from murdering Hannah Clark and her 3 kids, or Tara Brown from being run off the road and beaten to death over the head in an upturned car with a metal fire hydrant by Lionel Patia, or Ariel Bombara and her mother, who went to the West Australian Police last week, and then Mark Bombara, Ariel's father, turns up with a gun and murders the mother's best friend and the mother's best friend's daughter. Can't do shit for these women, but they can get a little rinky-dink AVO on mama for trying to feed her daughter and son home-cooked food that I had brought to school to walk her home and give them newly purchased clothes, having been kept from them at this stage by years. And of course, after years and years of being told that your mother's a fuckwit, your mother's crazy, every time your mother turns up, the police are called, there's an AVO, they put my children on a court stand. In a courtroom in January, that's Judge Atkinson's Michael Daly, in the Sutherland local court. She got legal aid to go out and say to my children, you really don't have to do this if you don't want to. And they came back and said, no, we don't want to. But Kelly McDonald-Payne, whose Ian's dick happened to be up that week, was out there with my children in the foyer, coaching them otherwise. And so they changed their mind. And so, oh, hang on, Phibbs comes back in, oh, hang on, they've changed their mind. They don't mind coming into the courtroom and testifying against their mother. And I've gone, hang on, stop, Your Honour. I want to read onto the record at this point of time. Who's out there with my children while Ian's being cross-examined by me here and we're all sitting in the room with Constable Phibbs? Who's got my children out there other than legal aid? Is there a woman there with my children, known to my children? And they come back and Ian's going, oh, that doesn't matter. And the judge goes, and I go, yeah, it does, because I reckon it's Kelly McDonald-Payne, you know, who he was fucking. And so, of course, she's gone, oh, go on, kids, go on. This is the woman who's come in, called the police when I've tried to pick up my children from a childcare centre, as ordered by the court, for school holidays, because I'm meant to have a half school holidays. My daughter, who she's bringing up without her own mother, 13 days out of 14 in a fortnight, comes screaming into Engadine after school care and calls me, you're just a fucking birth mother, in front of my child. She's called the police. They've called the police. They're going, what the fuck's going on here? My child's cowering in a corner. She's been taken into another room. Look, people go, phone the Women's Legal Service. Do you know how much the Women's Legal Service don't phone you back? They've given enough funds for 2 days a week for one person on a phone. And there's a deluge of women phoning them. They can't help you. They're run off their feet. I nearly had a stroke in December 2022 when I finally got through to my daughter one Saturday and asked her what she's doing. She said she's cooking a cake, and I said, oh, that's nice. Is Augie helping you? She said, no, Augie's not here. He's with Dada. And I said, what? You're cooking a cake and there's no one with you? She was 9. And I said, where are they? And she said, they've gone to Wollongong, leaving her in Hurstville. Have a look further down in the comments section at her burnt leg. She could have died in a house fire. The burn marks are going across her knee. Vertical bar heater. She fell asleep against a radiator. You can only imagine how tired she must have been to sustain those 2 burn marks. She looks seared like a chop on a grill. Massive burn mark bruising around her legs. Not that day, but in that house with that same negligent moron. The violent father who's got my kids and is abusing me every single moment of the night and day, in my nightmares, in my waking nightmares, by keeping my children from me. And he had taken my son down to choose a house in Wollongong, aided and abetted by DCJ New South Wales, without telling me where my children slept at night. So I got out my little pad, busted up now, and I got straight onto realestate.com.au, and I typed in 3-bedroom houses for rent in Wollongong. And I wrote down page after page after page of addresses. And my friend and I drove around them until we found my children's father's car. By then, the state government of New South Wales in Australia had changed, and Kate Washington was the Labor Minister. And she is now knowingly participating in calling me an unreasonable complainant after refusing to meet with me, and then having the hide to tell me, one of the admins of the Australian Feminist Facebook group, to not let the Minister for Women, Jodie Harrison, New South Wales, talk to me or meet with me. But she's on 702 radio with Stuart Little because her DCJ, Department of Communities and Justice, caseworkers who oversee the whole regime of out-of-home care and protection for children, those caseworkers have a union called the PSA, the Public Service Association, and guess who is the head honcho general secretary? Ian Little's brother, Stuart Little. Stuart with an E-W-A-R-T, just like the mouse. Stuart knows exactly how abusive Ian was to Lindy Green. He knows exactly how abusive Ian was to Michelle Daly. I don't know or care whether he knows how abusive he was to me, but 1 + 1. Hasn't stopped him from ignoring all the complaints that Ian sustained over the years of being employed on a handsome fee of about $110,000 or $15,000 a year, plus the $15,000 a year tax-free carers fee he gets for my son from DCJ, being about $125,000, plus 17% super, 4 weeks annual paid leave, rostered day off every fortnight. Oh, and he claims 100% care of my daughter because he's stolen her from me. So he now automatically, Amanda Richworth, deducts child support payments from my disability support pension. I've produced 3 Australian taxpayers. I had a good university degree from UTS in writing and filmmaking, media production. I was working on film sets when I was 30 with Phil Noyce's first AD, and he thought I was good, so he introduced me to Phil Noyce for a job that I didn't get, but they put me on a few other things. Then I was told I had endometriosis under general anaesthetic when I buckled over in pain one day. And that's the leading cause of infertility. So I scrambled around and thought, gosh, if I want to have a child, I better find a sperm donor. So I started to take out some people I knew who I respected their values of music and education and thought they'd be kind fathers. Boy, did I get a roost surprise on year 3 with Tim Friedman. And then his partner Marnie Round lied when I turned up in 2020, having been stuck for 3 months in the first COVID-19 border closure lockdown on top of everything, while Marnie Round and Tim Friedman did what my daughter Alice said, made her feel like shit. Marnie iced her, didn't talk to her for 3 weeks over the school holidays because Alice had the temerity to come down and visit me for 3 days in the Southern Highlands, 3 days after my 50th birthday. 2020, stuck in lockdown. And my partner, who said he was, who'd already gone ahead down to my house, chose that moment to leave me for a woman worth $20 million because all of his international touring work dried up as a head sound engineer of a very big famous Australian band who's been going for 30 years and was due to go around Europe and North America, and so that was all bets were off there because all the borders were shut internationally, and so he's a smoker and a drinker and he needs to eat, and no one can do that on the Australian dole unemployment benefit of $320 a week or less than $40 a day. So he made it pretty clear where his bread was buttered, and he pissed off pretty quickly, but did the oldest trick in the book and made it look like I was kicking him out. He was being so revolting to me that any self-respecting person would. And so Alice in 2021 finally turned 16, and I don't even have her phone number, and I haven't seen her since February 2019. So it's 3 years inclusive. They kept her phone number from me, her email, and they gave me 20 minutes on the phone with her, not even FaceTime, every fortnight. In which time she started to have panic attacks, went on antidepressants, and started self-harming. And her nanny told me that, employed by Tim Friedman, and the nanny's name was Tamara Case. And when I bowled up to Barbara Friedman on Coleroy Plateau and said, "How dare you? How dare your son, the sperm donor, the serial sperm donor, do this? How dare Marnie Brown participate in making my daughter feel like shit for visiting me? And how dare, by the way, you call my daughter a little slut?" When a big fight broke out in Christmas because you, Barbara, invited my son to come up to Coleroy for Christmas with my son's sister, Alice, and your son, Tim, said no, put the kibosh on it and said, "Augie's not coming here for Christmas." And Alice leapt to her brother's, Augie's, defence and said, "Why not? You've got kids with everyone else. Augie's my brother too. She's just as valid as your kids." And in the argument, Barbara's obviously had a few Christmas scotches. She's an otherwise nice person, and turns around and goes, "Oh, shut up, you little slut." And my daughter took it like an arrow, apparently, through her heart, according to her nanny, Tamara Case. So I bowled up and said, "How dare you?" Ambushed Barb and said, "How dare you call my daughter a little slut? Your son's the biggest fucking slut in Australia. Didn't you notice when you were over there cleaning his house like a good little mummy? When he was going through his bachelor days from his whole life? From 17 or 18 years to 38? And you drove over every week to clean his house for him for free? Like he couldn't do it himself or pay for a fucking cleaner? How dare you call my daughter a slut at 12 years old? How dare you? Your son goes through women more than towels. Most people go through towels." And she said, "Oh, yes, I know, dear. It was a very bad thing. I didn't really mean to. It really was. It wasn't very good. I'm not proud of it, but, but you've done hundreds of bad things." And, of course, she and I used to be great friends and have a hugely funny time laughing, so he destroyed all of that, of course, as well with his litigation. And so she stupidly got it out of me. She got it out of me. She said, "Who told you?" And I said, "Oh, I bet you'd like to know." And she said, "Oh, yes, I bet I'd like to." And I said, "The butler did it." This is how I said it. And she said, "No, really, dear, who was it? Was it the butler?" And I went, "No, it wasn't the butler, it was the nanny." And the next week, the nanny was fired by Tim Friedman. And the nanny died 2 years later at 50. You couldn't write this shit. Screen Australia. Jenny McMahon, you're in documentaries, so apparently I can't talk about it legally, so someone from fiction's going to have to call me back. I really want some development money, because if this shit doesn't leave my head and become some fantabulously horrific cautionary tale, sort of like Fleabag, but with far more tragedy thrown in than comedy, I'm thinking at this stage. I need people to phone pro bono, yeah, by all means, but I need them to find me some cash, because right now New South Wales taxpayers' money is about to be given to a company to finish for tonight's piece to camera, which is going to be taken over to DDTV Australia, DEE TV Australia at YouTube. I don't think that a single one of those things I've just told you was particularly fair. I particularly don't think that the violation of CEDAW, C-E-D-A-W, the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, that we in Australia voluntarily signed when I was 8 years old in 1979, but we have never upheld because women will never be equal to men so long as they don't have free abortions and free contraceptive pills around the whole world. But in Australia, we will never be equal to men whilst ever we don't have those things, but whilst ever we are told we have to pay anything per day for childcare, but particularly $200 per child per day for 5 years, from 0 to 5 years of age for childcare. Oh, and then there's after school care as well. How? When even Bronwyn Bishop of Choppergate fame from the Liberal National Party managed to tell Jenny Brockie on her Insight program years ago that the bestest data that they could get from the federal tax department was that $1.87 is returned to the Australian tax base for every $1 of taxpayer money spent on early childcare. So there's not even an economic reason for keeping women out of employment. There was an ideological one under the previous LNP male-dominated regime of Scott Morrison and Tony Abbott. Tony Abbott, the 21st century Australian Minister for Women, the man who Julia Gillard famously dressed down with her misogyny speech for anyone overseas, only 1 or 2 weeks after she'd thrown single mothers onto a dole instead of the single mother pension, which is much higher, when their youngest child reached 8, because she thought a job would be good for them, as if there was a fucking job out there that started after you dropped your child off to school at 9 in the morning and left at 2:30 in the afternoon to pick them up, a job that would pay the rent and the bills, 20 hours a week. And I could run this country better than a lot of them, and I mean it. I've run a daycare. I've run a business. I've been a sales manager. I wrote the first climate change program for Greenpeace and toured it around all sorts of high schools. I wrote science shows for kids and toured around primary schools. I've wiped assholes for a living. I've helped people cross roads. I've done market research. I've rolled out 3 national media campaigns. I've voluntarily fundraised for Aboriginal causes and I've been on the board of Women in Film and TV. I could run this shit show better than most of those clowns in Canberra. We're violating CEDAW by charging women $200 per day childcare fees and then telling them that they don't get superannuation, and their HECS debts go up when they can't afford to pay that and have to sit around doing the unpaid labour of raising GDP, gross domestic product, for the nation. So I'm going to start to read from these dossiers soon, because they are not settling with me over my Concord case. They've decided, I'm getting advice in the next couple of days, and the advice is that so far that the woman who has been put onto me is a senior counsel. She has worked across 3 states and territories of Australia. She changed her name after she got married, so she's a little bit old-fashioned, and she apparently has won in the High Court. So I don't think that they're taking me unseriously, because as I pointed out to her in the midst of all of that, right after I'd lost Madeline, I didn't finish this point, right after I'd lost Madeline to Ian at 5 years of age on the 28th of February 2017, 4 weeks after she started school next to Augie at Woy Woy Public, I had to stand on the 14th of March in 2017 and go for round 3 with Tim Friedman, who didn't even want Alice to visit me on any weekends at all by that stage. All of this was precipitous to the good old-fashioned nervous breakdown I had the following year, September 2018. But Tim even used Ian's abuse of me. He instructed his QC Fowler, Fowler, from a company called Super and Super Lawyers. He instructed his QC Fowler to use Ian Little's abuse of me as a reason to not have Alice around me, because I exposed Alice to abuse, whilst he was simultaneously helping Ian Little to take my children from me. And I found that out when I subpoenaed the DCJ material and read Tim Friedman write the lines to one of the caseworkers, I think it was Nikki Strong, saying, "Oh yes, we're taking the children down to Coaldale for this Christmas holidays. Of course, we don't tell the mother where the children are. She's been known to loiter in the local shops and on the beach looking for them." What a guy. Mr. Serial's sperm donor extraordinaire. 16 million bucks worth of real estate. And Alice texted me when I finally waited outside of Newtown train station on her 16th birthday bearing gifts because I hadn't seen her, didn't have a phone number, wanted to say happy 16th, darling. So we went like two furtive lovers and stole an hour in the local park, and I gave her her presents, and she went out that night with Barbara and Marnie and Tim to a fancy French restaurant in the CBD, wearing the clothes that I'd bought her and the pendant that I'd bought her. But she texted me a text that said, "Mum, I can't win. If I tell them I want to be with you, they make my life hell at home." They being Friedman and Round. "And if I don't come with you, then I hurt you." But Tamara Case, the nanny, had told me what they'd already done to hurt her by keeping her from me. So I've subpoenaed them both to court this week on the 5th of June, if you've got nothing better to do, at the Downing Centre. 5th of June, this Thursday. I strenuously encourage, if you're in my corner, if you're not, you can fuck off. But I strenuously encourage you to come down and lend a bit of a helping moral hand, because I'm constantly by myself in these things. And they put an AVO on me when I had the temerity to ring her up in her workplace, and I didn't have her mobile phone number because I finally found out after 5 years of her stealing my child off me and parenting my own daughter, taking irretrievable years of my daughter's life from me, doing all the things that mums would do with their daughter, like getting their nails done or their hair done or walking down the road and shopping or having breakfast on a Saturday, just everything that I used to do with my daughter, all publicly available over at Instagram. The skiing lessons, the ice skating lessons, the swimming lessons, the tennis, the fun, the love, the hugs, the music, the dancing, the singing, the piano playing, the meaningful relationship as defined by Section 60cc and by Article 9 of the United Nations. They put an AVO on me because if I walked past her in the street and happened to see her, not like I even knew what she looked like because I was never invited to get even the opportunity to know who the person who was bringing up my child instead of me was, with a sperm donor, who litigated against me and lied to me by omission by not telling me that he was doing it with other women, because I never would have agreed to come back to Sydney and share her. If I even knew what she looked like, if I'd walked down the street and went, "You miserable piece of shit, how do you sleep at night?" That's not illegal. There's no threat of harm. I'm just giving her a piece of my mind. But because I was stupid enough to do it on the phone, that's called use of a carriage service. And that, ladies and gentlemen, in Australia is yet another fucking farcical part of our legal system called a use of a carriage service criminal code. And if you do it on an email, same thing. If we walk down the street and just call them a cunt, no problem. Boy, just should have known which street that she was walking down. Could have hung around Horden Street, I guess, up the top there where it meets King. Oh, and that's right, when I did drive all the way from Tasmania with a car full of beautiful fur coats and lovely clothes that no longer fit me, 20 kilos over because they put the wrong fucking drugs in me because I never had what they said that I had, and menopause. And look at all this flabby, 20 kilos, 77 kilos instead of the 57 kilos I used to be. I couldn't find a park on King Street, so I had to pull just around the corner, and she put a 100-metre AVO on me for trying to pick up my child, as per court orders, and waving them up at the house and going, "Alice, it's your mum. You're with me now. It's 2020. Come on. I've been 3 months locked by myself down in COVID. Come on, it's school holiday time, darling. Let's go." And so that was misreported and lied about by the Marrickville police, specifically Angus Goodwin and Evan Wallace, who are running this case, Yasmin Catley and Michael Daly, Attorney General of New South Wales, second, and first Yasmin Catley, Minister for Police. The little Marrickville festy little fucking viper's nest that you got going there. Oh, by the way, fuck. oh, she's sworn in public she's a major criminal. Get fucked. Tom Gleeson says fuck every third sentence on Hardcore. It's fuck, fuck, fuck. That was the one charge they had against me. My record was she swore in public. When they put police drug sniffer dogs on me, I said, fuck off. And they said, don't say that, it's a swearing in public. I said, don't fucking tell me what to say. You put a bloody dog on me, scare the shit out of me. I haven't got any drugs. I didn't authorise you to do that. Get fucked. And they said, don't say that again. You're saying it in public. I said, get fucked. Don't fucking tell me what to do. Put the fucking dog on me. And then I went, fuck, 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 fuck. And I sung. And I stepped off over the road off King Street. So they came and arrested me. No shit. So that's what they had on my record. My great big criminal record was swearing in public in the year 2005 in the 21st century. Dropping the F-bomb. Crime in Australia. But you can't save women from being murdered by men, eh, cops? Yeah, 5th of June. Downing Centre. Be there or be square. Because I've subpoenaed Round and Friedman and Alice's psychologist, Louise O'Sullivan. Because I think the truth's a good thing. I think that if you've done that to a little girl between the ages of 13 and 16, there's 20 years difference between Round and Friedman. I mean, you can see what's in it for her. She's got no kids of her own, so she gets to have my kid without any fucking effort of her own, doing all the hard yards when they're young, gets to enjoy all the lovely years, and then if he drops dead before her, which is odds on because she's 20 years younger than him, she gets $16 million worth of real estate. Genius. Oh, and then when I said this or something else like this about it, it was like, you violated an AVO. You made a Facebook post about me. Ugh. Like, when you fucking work with Aboriginal women who've had their children stolen from them, and so you have participated in stealing my child from me. So for a living, you do something that makes you better placed than any other person to know what the damage is that is done when you withhold a child from a mother and a mother from a child, but yet you participated in that. What conclusion can we draw? You are either just a fucking disgusting person, or you're in it for the money, or both, or whatever, I don't care. But I'm going to get to the bottom of what my daughter told her psychologist. And if those people don't turn up from the subpoenas that were served on them in due course, by registered post and by a human being who videoed it for proof, that was a priceless shot. You know that MasterCard ad? The look on their face? Priceless. That was priceless. You're going to get a poster made of that one, laminate it. I can turn it into a dartboard, I think. See ya. I need some cash in my GoFundMe to get some lawyers and or a pro bono lawyer of serious clout. So help me out, please. Good night.